Hello, welcome to this edition of Then, Now and the Future, which is Peter and I chatting about life, the universe, and everything. And this week we're going to be concentrating very much on Peter, because one of the interesting things I've found out about you, Peter, is that for some 2 years or so, you and your soapbox went to Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park, and address the masses. Tell me about that. How did that come about?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. It's something, per period of my life, I sort of feel I have to sort of get off my chest or something, talk a bit about, just not leave it hidden. It was back in the early 90s. I was just trying to work out, I reckon it started in the winter 91, 92, and it went on for about 4 years in that period. And it was actually a set of kitchen steps I used to carry up to Hyde Park.
So were you on the underground or a bus?
Yeah, I would use a bus or the underground. I was living in Clapham at the time, so I just hopped on. I think it was usually the underground, actually.
Okay. Did it have a little placard or something that went with it?
I think it was enough to carry the steps, to be honest. So that's what I did. I headed up there. So yeah, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity. So I don't know. You should perhaps you're going to sort of guide us with the questions about what.
So what is it that you were speaking about? What is it that moved you to the point that you felt you had to, share it with others?
Okay, well, I suppose what it was something you would describe as something like classical evangelical Protestant preaching, something like that. I had a King James Bible. I would take that, and I would simply hold forth along the lines of what I understood the basics of the gospel to be, which was, I mean, one of the terms that's used is justification by faith, that faith in Christ saves the soul. So I don't want to go too deeply into that. My theology has come quite a long way since then, but that's what it was. You might call it fundamentalist or something like that. That's what people would, how they would perceive it.
So you said to me in one of our early chats that you didn't have a particularly religious upbringing. So
that's correct.
So what took you to religion to the point?
Well, that's a very good question. So there was no religion at home, but school and like Cubs and Scouts, I was in that movement as well. That was connected with the Church of England in the village come town where I grew up. So I had religious input extensively, in fact, at school, but nothing at home. So that's how I started. And I guess in my teens, I began to look for some spiritual reality. So I remember I had a friend who was an evangelical Christian, and we used to have conversations. And I was sort of interested and sort of open to it, but not committed. And then
how did that go down at home?
Well, having a friend.
No, your sort of drift, as it were, towards religion.
I don't think it was really of much interest early on, because home was just home. I wasn't going to any church or any religious organization as such, except through my school and Scouts type situation, and even my father was involved in that in the early days. My father's side was, I would say, lapsed Anglican. So there was not such a distant, my aunt was still going to church and so on, and my uncles and aunts. So there was this Anglican atmosphere to that side of the family. My mother's side was much more distant. They were, if you go back far enough, it was some sort of non-conformist background. And my German grandmother from a Roman Catholic background, but that was all much more distant, so more of a secular atmosphere. But it wasn't impinging when I was still a teenager. It wasn't really impinging.
Okay. So you had a friend that you had these sort of religious type discussions with, and somehow or other, and I'd love you to explain how you got drawn to the spiritual, mystical side.
Yeah, well, that's it. So I sort of headed in another direction, really. I started reading. I think I went to the local library actually and got a few books. Books by C.S. Lewis was one, and then there was a Benedictine monk who had set up an ashram because of
So,
combined.
I'm not aware. C.S. Lewis wrote about sort of religion and
Yes. C.S.
spiritualism
Lewis wrote, I think his most famous non-fictional work is called Mere Christianity, and he wrote several books. So he was a sort of Christian philosopher, you could say. So quite a few works besides his, the Narnia Chronicles.
Okay, so you'd spend what, hours in the library?
Well, I borrowed the books. I spent hours reading them, certainly, and I had this opportunity to go to the Far East. A friend, his brother was working out there, and he said, "Just come here. You can stay with us. Just get the flights." That's all we had to do. So we had somewhere to go and stay, and it was in Malaysia. And I guess that was the mystical experience. There were some mystical experiences at that point. And in connection, and I connected somehow with what I was reading, and I became, I suppose I said, you would have asked me that I came to believe in God, in the reality of God at that time.
Okay, I can't let that go when you say there were some mystical experience.
Yes. Well, I mean, I suppose the idea is that God can be experienced. I mean, this ties in with plenty of theology, which would be for another occasion. But that God can be mystically experienced. I mean, that's another topic I studied this at university, the mystics of the Western Christian tradition. So, what is a mystical experience? I mean, I don't know where to start in answering that. What does it mean to you if somebody says that?
You just mentioned sort of college, and let's just want to take a small retrograde step backwards, because you gave up a science degree and went into a theological degree. Did you?
Yeah, actually, we're still chronologically on track, actually, because this was before the trip to the Far East was before.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that was, I had a year out. I worked for most of that time, and then I went to Malaysia.
Right.
So
okay.
we took in Singapore and Thailand. So I saw, Buddhism, Islam, and also there's Christianity there. So most religions are represented in Malaysia, and of course in Thailand, that's a Buddhist country. So yeah, what you referred to happened when I came back. That I started studying physics at Bristol University. But I was so much involved, if you like, in this philosophical religious side of things that I changed studying theology and religious studies after a few weeks, just after a few weeks.
Okay. How did that go down at home?
Well, that was, the beginning of, there was no, I mean, I don't think my family really, what's the word? There wasn't much engagement. I mean, and I guess that was symptomatic of a wider situation, but it was just like, well, probably not approved of, but it wasn't to the extent of anything being done about it.
Okay. And in that decision-making process, Peter, where did you think doing a theological degree was going to take you? Did you think that you were going to go and become
to be honest, it was
or...
really just like, well, this is the truth. It has to be explored, and that's what I'll do, I mean, and that attitude has sort of kept me from worldly success in the stricter sense for most of my life, because I've always been pursuing that side of things. So, an expression I used in my notes was non-career, I have, I often look back and think, well, I could have done this all differently. It wasn't really necessary, not to have what we call a normal or proper career, but it just, for various reasons, that's how it worked out. And I guess my family watched with increasing despair as the years went by. But that's another story about how that went. So yeah, change of.
But I guess this is about personal fulfillment.
Well, that's it. And I think at least we have that liberty. You have that liberty to do something very unusual, maybe. So it was probably necessary. All sorts of things I've done, I don't really regret them on an absolute level. I certainly it's made my life less comfortable, but you know, I can't actually see how I would have done it differently.
Well, less comfortable physically, but
Yes.
you know, balanced by the emotional sort of comfort.
Well, yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, if you taste spiritual reality, let's put it that way, then yeah, that's why you don't worry so much about these other things.
Yeah, and when we've in all the conversations, and we've had a number now, you always strike me as someone who's sort of, you know, very relaxed, very, you know, on a very sort of even plane, a very even keel. And you know, as a life coach, as a speaking coach, a lot of my clients, the common thread that runs through their lives tends to be, you know, sort of chaos and confusion.
Yes.
They can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah,
There's
sure.
so much going on. Where do you break that circle? And you don't come across like that.
Well, I guess, I mean, I suppose it's down to one's perception of reality, isn't it? I mean, if you wholeheartedly believe the dogmas of Orthodox Christianity, then your perspective on this world is yeah, you're not going to get too worried about the details, if you understand what I'm saying.
Sure, sure. So where did you did this theological sort of degree? Where
Yes.
did that then take you?
Well, towards the end of it, I was still sort of this in Oriental studies. You know, I studied Sanskrit, I studied Indian religion, Indian philosophy, besides studying Christian history and theology as well. And you know, I had an option to carry on studying, but I didn't have the money to do it. You know, to do a postgrad. So and this happened twice actually. Once at SOAS, once at Oxford. I could have studied, and I guess if I'd had the willpower, I could have done that. I could have got the money together and so on. But I was just, I don't know, a bit sort of defeatist or whatever. I don't know what it was. I just didn't want to put myself in that box and go through all the how to fund a postgrad research without, you know, money. I could have perhaps worked part-time. I don't know, whatever. So I did drift. For a bit, and then it was the Church of England, which was the sort of thing that I sort of came to the conclusion. Actually, we missed out an important aspect, which was the yoga aspect in India, right? I was doing, and this was from the beginning of my time at university, that I was involved in a group called Sahaja Yoga, and that was like, you know, it seemed like the truth, the reality, and I was involved with that. And I lived in an ashram. I was very totally committed to that, and I went to India twice with that organization.
Okay, and then somehow or other that led you to the Church of England.
Yeah, well, yes. So I studied theology. To put it in very brief terms, I studied theology and religious studies, and this helped me to see my way out of that yoga group, to see that there were various inconsistencies there, theologically untenable positions, and so I could just walk away, because I thought, okay, well, there's a lack of truth here. Although there's a lot of commitment, a lot of enthusiasm, there's some, you know, lack of truth. So of course that left a vacuum, and that eventually I thought, well, you know, where is the truth in England? There must be some. God hasn't left it without a witness. So I became involved with the Church of England. And I went through many aspects. I don't know how much you know about the Church of England, but it's what they call a broad church. So you can have pretty well any opinion you want within it. And I was in, but what we have what's called the Anglo-Catholic, and which follows more sort of Roman Catholic model, and then you have more evangelical Protestants, and everything in between, basically. And I was involved. I sort of did voluntary work in various parishes and locations. And the idea was testing vocation to see whether I could, you know, might become an Anglican clergyman. And that went on for, I suppose, 4 or 5 years. until I eventually came to see that it just wasn't going to work. You know, there just wasn't. I couldn't find sufficient principles in this organization to identify with, and you know, so I ended up in a sort of non-conformist environment.
Okay, so that confuses me a little in relation to you talk about the the Bible and the truth of the Bible.
Yes.
But you don't feel comfortable with the truth of the church?
Well, I do, of course. I mean, you know, now becoming, you know, we have to race forward to now. I think the doctrine of the church is essential. The reality of the church, that there is one church, you know, once you know, it says in the creed, it says, I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Now, that dogma is, I would say, more or less completely neglected, or completely, neglected or glossed over, because really we have now multiple churches, so-called, and that's okay. Everyone's thinking, well, you know, they're a church, I'm a church, we just do our own thing, and that's fine. But I heartily believe in one church, and that you need to be in it to be saved. So, but that I'm saying that as an Orthodox Christian. Yeah, true.
Okay, so we might be starting to get a bit controversial here, and you can nudge me back out of those murky waters if you're not comfortable. But there's lots of different religions, and every religion says my God is the true God.
Yes. Yeah.
So how does that relate? What makes one religion, one dogma?
Well, I mean, yeah, what you say is true. So there are multiple religions saying more or less that they have the truth. But if you ask a lot of people in this religion, they will say, well, yeah, we have some truth, other religions have other truth. But the question is, how are you going to resolve that issue, right? So you can either resolve it by saying, well, we're sort of together somehow, we believe different things, and but somehow it'll be okay. Or you can say, well, my religion is right, everyone else is wrong. Okay. Now, the thing is, truth, it comes back to this essential point. Is there such a thing as truth? I mean, let's say about religion. I mean, we could say religion, it's about, to some extent, about what we experience in this life, but it's very much about what happens in the next, isn't it? It's about what the significance of death is and what happens after death. And different religions are making different claims about that, and they can't all be true at the same time. The classic one I always say is that the Hindus say, well, it's really your soul will be reincarnated as another human or as an animal or something like that. Whereas Christianity says no, the soul is judged after death and it goes to be with God or not. Now, really, one of those is true. They can't both be true. So that's what I would say, is that we need to pursue truth and deal with these issues and find the solutions. And that's what I've tried to do over the years, is to...
And I guess that's where belief sits between those.
Yeah, that's it. But I mean, life is full of belief. Everything, we believe all sorts of things on a day-to-day basis. And yet don't really look at the most important things. I mean, this is the thing, that people somehow, the most important things are pushed to one side. And people haven't really dealt with, getting to the bottom of these great theological issues. Yeah.
So where does that leave you now? Because obviously you work for a living. Where where do you sit now with religion and work? And
well, I mean, yes, I mean, I eventually, I guess I settled into a career as an English teacher. I left the United Kingdom, I moved to Hungary, and that's where I became an English teacher, and that gave me a sort of identity in a secular sense, because I couldn't fit, but I mean, the bottom line was I couldn't fit into any of the existing religious institutions. None of them could give me a career, because I didn't have any common or sufficient common ground with them. I didn't see that it was they were organizations which were advancing the truth in the fullest sense. So I was left without, as typically a theology graduate would have some sort of career connected with a religious organization. So that wasn't an option for me. Also, there was the RE teacher thing, but I sort of dropped out of that fairly quickly because it was a similar thing. You still have a sort of, particular kind of body of beliefs that you're talking about. So yeah, that I took a secular career basically with English teaching, and that also involved translation and that sort of linguistic type work. So that's it. And I've recently, based on my work with a lot of businesses, I've been, teaching English for over a quarter of a century, and in that time, I've taught a lot of business owners and so on, senior managers, and I'm now working with an organization where we actually, it's more we're helping businesses in a more concrete way than just listening to them, but actually helping them along the way, and it's more sort of coaching, advising type.
So what I love is drawing sort of parallels from things. So you've spent your whole life, if you like, searching for a truth, and now I suppose in business you're helping businesses find their truth.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think, yeah, that's it. I mean, I think what is needed for businesses, I mean, first of all, you need there's some basic knowledge, right, which is built up over the years about what happens with small business or small medium-sized businesses, which is what we deal with. So, it's there. But the trouble is the typical business person with their own business is in the thick of it, aren't they? They're in the thick of the fight. And it's very hard for them to keep connection with best practice and just theory, if you like, which is important theory. So there's that side of it. And then there's just, you need somebody to be there and just, be accountable to discuss what's going on, to somebody to come back to. So it seems this kind of work is some essential service really to the business world.
But it seems to sit very comfortably alongside the tenets of the religious sort of.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, I think I don't have any ulterior motives, so I think that's it. I'm always concerned for truth, and that's been my goal. So ultimately, honesty is the best policy, isn't it? So trying to follow up your line of reasoning, I think that there is some logic in it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So how would you sum up? I mean, what is truth for you?
What is truth? Well, I think truth is the perception of reality. And I think the most important truths we need to know are obviously about our life and the significance of death and life after death. That's the one that begs the question. So that's what Orthodox Christianity answers. And I come back to this sort of, use this word mystical, but there is a reality, there is a change in the nature and quality of our life now, which comes through I would say union with Christ, with the mystical reality of faith. So that is the key. Okay, that is the center of truth. But all truth is interconnected. So it can be truth about historical events, or about cosmology, or about health issues. I mean, that's been a classic one recently, hasn't it? That all sorts of conflicting truth claims. In this COVID period, people were told to believe certain things. Massive reliance on faith in the truth of things. But examination, closer examination, would indicate otherwise. So that's a very important. That's a life and death thing, isn't it? What you believe about what your body is doing is critical. I would put that in second place after theology. Because theology is about your soul. You could die now. What's going to happen. But then the next thing is you could die tomorrow if you make the wrong decision about your health. So, and there's a hierarchy going from there.
Peter, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing some very personal stuff there. And as always, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Marcus. As I say, I really wanted to sort of, I think one of the reasons I got in touch with you at the beginning was I felt the need to sort of express and myself on these things, and you expressed an interest. So thank you for your interest, and look forward to our next discussion.
We'll do it all again next week.
Yeah, we'll find something to talk about then as well.
Cheers.
Okay, cheers. Bye.